A country's budget, it's not just a bunch of numbers on a page, right? It's really a blueprint for the future. And today, we're going to unpack India's budget for 2026-27. It's this super ambitious plan with one massive goal, to transform the country into a developed nation. So let's dive into the strategy. Right at the heart of this whole thing is one single, really powerful phrase, Viksit Bharat. Now, that translates to developed India, but it's so much more than just a slogan. It's the core vision, and it's all about balancing these huge economic ambitions with inclusive growth. The idea is to make sure nobody gets left behind on this journey. All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the big picture economic philosophy. Then, we'll dig into the two main growth engines, that's manufacturing and services. After that, we'll check out the massive infrastructure projects being built, see how this all trickles down to small businesses and farmers, and wrap up with the single biggest takeaway from the whole thing. Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1, the economic blueprint. Because look, before we get into all the specific policies and the big numbers, you've got to understand the core philosophy that's driving every single decision here. And this is really interesting because it frames the entire approach perfectly. On one side, you have reform over rhetoric. That's a signal that this is all about making deep structural changes, not just talking a big game. And on the other side, people over populism. This points to a focus on what's good for citizens in the long run, instead of just short-term popular giveaways. Think of these principles as the four pillars holding up the entire economic plan. The whole strategy is built on hitting a few key targets: keeping growth high, around that 7% mark, making sure inflation stays in check, being smart with government spending, that's fiscal discipline, and creating stability through real structural reforms. Everything else we're going to talk about, it all rests right on this foundation. Okay, so we've got the philosophy down. The big question now is, how is India actually going to sustain its growth? Well, the budget points to two key engines to make it happen: manufacturing and services. Let's dig into how the plan is to fire up both of them. And this visual just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? It's a dual focus. You've got the manufacturing push on one side, a huge drive to make more things right here in India. And on the other, services sector renewal, which is all about solidifying India's spot as a top player in global services. It's like a powerful 1-2 punch for growth. All right, let's talk manufacturing first. The goal here is literally to supercharge it. And we're not just talking about making more stuff. No, this is a really strategic move. It's about building a strong, resilient industrial base, especially in those high-value sectors, so that in the end, India doesn't have to rely so much on other countries for critical goods. So what does that actually look like on the ground? Well, it means some really targeted, super high-tech initiatives. We're talking about a phase 2 for the mission to build semiconductors right in India. There's a huge push into biopharmaceuticals. They're calling it Biopharma Shakti. And on top of that, new plans to produce really critical materials like rare earth magnets and key electronic parts at home. But here's the thing, it's not all about just the fancy high-tech stuff. The strategy is also about building a really broad industrial base. That means new chemical parks, a big push for container manufacturing, and get this, reviving 200 older legacy industrial clusters. It's a smart blend of tapping into old strengths while chasing new opportunities, even in things you might not expect, like making affordable sports equipment. Okay, let's switch gears to that other big engine, the services sector. There's a huge, renewed emphasis here, and the thinking is pretty clear. A developed India, a Viksit Bharat, isn't just going to be powered by factories. It's going to be powered by knowledge and skills. And this covers the whole spectrum. We're talking healthcare, education, tourism, and of course, tech. And the plans for services are just as targeted as what we saw in manufacturing. The idea is to set up 5 major hubs for medical tourism and create a special committee to make sure what students are learning actually leads to a job. But honestly, the really forward-looking part, it's this massive push to spark creativity by setting up thousands of labs for animation, visual effects, gaming, and comics, AVGC, in schools all over the country. Pretty cool, right? So you've got these two powerful engines, manufacturing and services, ready to go. But what do they need? They need a solid road to run on. And that brings us to the third pillar of this budget, a massive, and I mean massive, push to build modern infrastructure. This is literally the physical backbone for the entire new economy. Okay, get ready for a big number. Let this one sink in for a second. 12.2 lakh crore rupees. That's the planned government spending on infrastructure for FY27. That one number tells you everything you need to know about the sheer scale and ambition here. It is a huge bet on building for the future. And this chart, wow, it just puts that number into a stunning perspective. I mean, just look at that jump. We're going from only 2 lakh crore back in FY15 to a planned 12.2 lakh crore in FY27. It's a visual that just powerfully shows you how much investment in public infrastructure has exploded over the last decade. So where is all this cash going? Well, it's all about creating a super smooth, super efficient logistics network. We're talking new freight corridors to connect the East and West coasts, getting 20 new national waterways up and running, and launching 7 high-speed rail corridors. They're even calling them growth connectors, which is pretty spot on, since they're designed to link up all the major economic hubs. And it's not just about roads and rails, concrete and steel. There's a really strong green angle to this whole push. There's a 20,000 crore rupee plan just for carbon capture technology, plus continued support for making lithium-ion cells for batteries. The goal here is to build a foundation that's not just strong, but sustainable too. Okay, so we've talked about all this big macro-level stuff, but what does it all mean for the average person, for the small business owner? Well, that brings us right to our next section, how this budget plans to directly support the real backbone of the Indian economy. That's the small and medium businesses, the MSMEs, and of course, the farmers. So for small businesses, the budget lays out a really clear 3-pronged approach. The whole idea is to create an environment where these companies don't just survive, they actually grow and thrive. The goal is to help them become champions in their own fields. So here's how that 3-part plan works. First up, there's equity support. That's a new 10,000 crore rupee fund to help small and medium businesses grow. Second, there's liquidity support. This is a big one. It makes using a digital payment platform mandatory for government contracts, which basically just means small businesses get their money faster. And third, professional support. They're creating something called corporate mitras. Think of them as guides to help small businesses deal with all the complicated paperwork and rules without breaking the bank. All right, now let's talk agriculture. The focus here is on strengthening the whole sector by thinking beyond just the basic staple crops. The strategy is to really encourage high-value farming and to modernize the entire supply chain, from the moment a seed is planted all the way to the market. The ultimate goal, to raise farmer incomes. And you can really see this diversification strategy in the specific programs being rolled out. There are new initiatives to promote crops that fetch a higher price, like cashews, cocoa, and walnuts. And it goes beyond just traditional farming, too. There's a big push to strengthen the fisheries sector by developing reservoirs and making sure there are better ways to get the fish to market. So we've walked through the core philosophy, the big growth engines, the massive infrastructure plans, and the support systems for businesses and farmers. It all brings us to the big takeaway. What's the one overarching message here? Well, it's all about charting a very clear, very determined path forward. When you step back and look at the whole picture, this budget is a really comprehensive and, let's be honest, an incredibly ambitious blueprint. It cleverly connects high-tech manufacturing with modernizing agriculture, and it links massive infrastructure projects with direct support for the smallest businesses. The vision is definitely clear. But the ultimate challenge is always in the execution. And that leaves us with the big question, right? How will this blueprint, this plan on paper, actually transform all of that ambition into a tangible, everyday reality for 1.4 billion people?